dive right in. Today, we're talking about something that I think a lot of people are interested in, that 4-day work week. So much buzz around it.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at some developments in the UK, specifically from an article in Personnel today.
Okay.
You know, an extra day off sounds pretty good.
Right.
But it really is like this whole rethinking of how we work.
It is, and it's fascinating to see that it's really becoming mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
200 UK companies have actually made the switch to a 4-day week permanently.
Wow, 200 companies?
That's over 5,000 employees.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to mean that employers are really starting to, like, change how they think about all this.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's interesting. It's not just like, tech companies. We're seeing marketing, advertising, PR, even charities.
All sorts of sectors.
All sorts of sectors, yeah.
It makes you wonder, what is it about certain industries that are, finding this so beneficial?
That's true.
Like maybe fields that have more project-based work.
Or maybe they're having trouble finding people. Maybe that's part of it.
Could be, yeah. Be interesting to see what the research says as it comes out.
Yeah, well, speaking of research, the 4-Day Week Foundation, they're actually doing some pretty in-depth work on this, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're partnering with academics to really rigorously study all the impacts of making this shift.
I mean, that's important, right? We need to understand what this means long-term.
Definitely, yeah. They're looking at, not just productivity, but also well-being of the employees, how are the companies doing, and even broader economic effects.
It's like a giant experiment in the real world.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating to watch it unfold, actually. And their initial trial, back in 2022, they found some pretty positive things like, productivity actually went up.
Yeah.
And they had less people leaving their jobs, and it was easier to find new employees, which, I mean, it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? You work less, but things get better.
It does challenge the way we traditionally think about work, that's for sure. But the idea is that, when people are well rested, and they're more engaged, they can actually focus better and be more efficient.
So it's not just about working less, it's about working differently, I guess.
That's it, yeah. Working smarter, not longer.
Now, the big question, I think, for a lot of people is, does this mean you get paid less?
Right, and that's where things get a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
Some companies are, going with the 4-day week, but they are reducing pay proportionally.
Okay.
Which, raises questions about whether people can actually afford to live on that and could lead to some disparities, especially for people who aren't earning as much to begin with.
That makes sense. I mean, if you're already struggling to make ends meet,
right,
that extra day off might not feel so good if you can't pay your bills.
Exactly. So it's leading to a lot of discussion about how do we balance this shorter work week with people still being able to, live comfortably.
Are there any solutions out there? I mean, are companies figuring out ways to make this work?
Well, some companies are trying out things like incentives based on productivity.
Okay.
So if you can get your work done, to a certain standard within that shorter time frame,
You can actually earn the same amount or even more.
potentially even more. Yeah, so it could be a win-win.
Interesting.
Yeah, rewarding people for being efficient.
Now, what about the government? Are they getting involved in this at all?
So the new Labor government, they haven't actually made a 4-day work week mandatory,
Okay.
but there has been a pretty big change.
Okay.
Employees now have the right to formally request flexible working arrangements.
So that means, like, they can ask to change their hours or the days they work?
Exactly, including a 4-day week.
That's a pretty big deal, actually. It gives people a lot more control over their schedules.
It does, and I think it shows that there's a growing understanding that, this traditional 9 to 5, 5 days a week,
Yeah.
maybe that's not the only way or even the best way to work.
It really feels like we're at this crossroads
Yeah.
where we're really questioning, like, all these assumptions about how work should be done. We see the potential benefits. More productivity, people are happier, more flexibility.
Yeah.
But we've also got to figure out how to make it fair financially
Right.
and how to make it work for all the different types of jobs out there.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue.
But that's what makes it so interesting.
It really does.
It seems like, we're really starting to question that traditional work structure, the 9 to 5, and this 4-day week is really leading the way.
Yeah, definitely.
But, I mean, with any big change, you got to look at both sides, right?
Absolutely. It's important to be balanced in how we approach this.
So what about the potential downsides? One thing I've heard people worry about is, like, won't you just end up having to cram more work into those 4 days?
That's a valid concern. Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that just kind of defeat the purpose? Like, you're supposed to be less stressed, have more time for life outside of work.
Right. And if companies just like shorten the week without really thinking about how to change the work itself,
Yeah.
it could end up with people feeling even more overwhelmed.
So it's not just about working less, it's about working differently, like we said before.
Exactly. Yeah. It's got to be a whole shift in how we think about work. What are the priorities? How do we use our time best?
And companies need to be on board with that, right? Like flexible schedules, streamlining things, using technology to be more efficient.
Absolutely. It's a whole company culture shift, not just, a check mark on a list.
No, what about jobs where you need people working all the time? Like healthcare, emergency services.
Right. Those are tricky.
Can you even have a 4-day week in those fields?
Maybe not in the traditional sense, like everyone just takes Friday off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that those workers can't benefit from the ideas behind it. Work-life balance, making sure people aren't burnt out.
So you could have like rotating shifts or people work longer days but fewer of them.
Exactly. Yeah. Or more flexible arrangements that still ensure everything's covered.
It's a good reminder that like one solution isn't going to work for everybody.
Yeah. There's no one size fits all.
Different industries are going to have to get creative and find what works for them.
And that's going to be a lot of trial and error
Yeah.
as we figure this out.
Earlier, we were talking about the money side of things. And some people might have to take a pay cut,
Right.
but won't that hurt morale? Like,
Yeah.
if people feel like they're losing out, are they really going to be happy about a 4-day week?
That's a real concern. And companies have to be really careful about that, how they handle it.
Yeah.
Transparency is key. Being open about the financial model, how it works.
Like we talked about before, some places are trying those productivity incentives
Hmm.
so you can still earn the same or even more if you're really efficient.
Yeah, so it's about finding those creative solutions that actually benefit both sides.
I mean, it feels like we're in uncharted territory here.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's going to be a lot of learning as we go.
Definitely.
Are there any other potential downsides we should be keeping an eye on as more and more companies try this out?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is how do you make sure customer service doesn't suffer?
Right, because if you're only open 4 days a week,
Yeah.
that could be a problem for customers.
Exactly. And then also, just the day-to-day running of the business. How do you maintain efficiency with fewer working hours?
So companies need to be thinking ahead, like maybe staggered schedules or using more automation
Yeah, or outsourcing certain tasks strategically.
so that things run smoothly and customers don't even notice the difference.
Exactly. It's all about planning and being proactive.
It sounds like to really do this 4-day week right, you can't just focus on one thing.
Right.
You got to look at the whole picture, the whole
You got a
business,
approach, yeah.
and address any problems before they come up.
And be willing to, adjust as you go.
So we've talked about some of the challenges, but I think it's important to step back and think about the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
What does this whole movement, this push for a 4-day week, tell us about how our relationship with work is changing?
I think it shows that we're starting to realize that, work isn't everything.
Yeah.
That line between our work life and our personal life, it's getting blurrier and blurrier.
Especially with technology, always being connected.
Exactly. And people want more flexibility, more control over their time.
And they're putting more value on things like well-being.
Absolutely. It's not just about climbing the career ladder anymore.
It's like a cultural shift.
It really is.
Like we're reevaluating what's truly important.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just defined by our jobs anymore.
And this is leading to more demand for these flexible, employee-centric models, like the 4-day week.
Yeah, it's not just about making a living. It's about actually living a good life.
Exactly.
This conversation has really highlighted that the 4-day work week, it's not just like a scheduling thing.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It's a reflection of this huge societal shift.
Yeah, it's about redefining our relationship with work.
Putting well-being first.
And finding a better balance.
It's exciting, it's challenging, and there's a lot of potential there.
A lot of possibilities, for sure.
And as this movement keeps growing,
Yeah.
it'll be fascinating to see how it shapes not just the future of work,
Right.
but, society as a whole.
Absolutely. It's a story that's still being written.
So we've really gone deep on this 4-day work week, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
From how popular it's getting to, like, the nitty-gritty of actually making it work.
All the challenges.
And it's clear that this is like a big deal, a real change in how we think about work.
It really is, yeah. It's not just a fad.
As we wrap things up here, I'm curious, what do you think? Like, big picture, what kind of lasting changes could this bring to society?
I think, it could fundamentally change how we view work itself.
Oh, yeah.
We're so used to thinking that our worth is tied to how many hours we work.
Yeah, like the more you work, the more valuable you are.
Exactly. And the 4-day week really challenges that. It forces us to think about, okay, what's really important? Our well-being, our personal growth, contributing to things outside of work.
It's like we're remembering that work is a tool,
Yeah.
not the whole point of life.
Exactly. And by giving people more time, less stress, it could open up so many possibilities.
What do you mean?
Well, imagine people have more time to be creative, to come up with new ideas, to volunteer, to spend time with family and friends, just to enjoy life.
That sounds pretty good, actually.
It's not just working less, it's living more.
But realistically, do you think this could become the norm? Or are there just too many obstacles?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think we're at a turning point.
You do.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum behind this, and the research is showing real benefits.
So as more companies try it out and they see success,
Others will follow. It's kind of like a domino effect.
and with technology changing all the time, making things more efficient,
And people wanting that work-life balance.
the traditional 5-day week might start to look like really outdated.
I think so, yeah.
Pretty exciting to think about.
It is.
But it also makes you wonder, like, how do we prepare for such a big change?
Well, my advice would be, don't be afraid to experiment, to try things out.
Okay.
There's no magic formula. Every company, every person is different.
So companies need to really think about their specific needs, talk to their employees, try different things, and see what works.
Exactly. And for individuals, I'd say keep learning new skills.
Yeah.
Be adaptable and make sure you're taking care of yourself mentally and physically.
So it's really up to all of us, employers and employees, to figure out how to make this work.
We can't just sit back and wait for change. We have to be part of it.
And this 4-day week, with all the focus on flexibility, well-being, getting things done,
It gives us a really interesting model to work with.
it's been a fascinating deep dive, hasn't it?
It has.
This 4-day work week, it's more than just a schedule. It's a chance to rethink how we work, how we live.
A chance to create a better future for everyone.
So as we wrap up, one last thought for everyone listening. What would you do with an extra day each week?
That's a good question.
It's something to think about as we all figure out what the future of work and the future of our lives is going to look like.